So hello guys, and welcome to another discussion video. And yes, I know I've been talking about Paper Mario a lot, but I mean, the Thousand Year Door remake was something that I've been wanting for quite a long time. It was really the thing I've been hoping for, like, in any direct over the past few years. Like, even though it was really unlikely, it's always the thing I put on my bingo card. It's always the thing that I've just thrown out in prediction videos. Even though it was extremely unlikely, I've always wanted it. So it was so surreal and just mind-blowing, mind-boggling that they actually revealed this remake. So I have quite a lot to say about it here. And all of my expectations and hopes over the past 4 years now have just been kind of brewing and just kind of got completely flipped on their head over this past weekend and over the past few days here. It's just, yeah, I just have quite a lot to say, but in this video specifically, I'm going to talk about how this could actually be happening, since it seemed very unrealistic with the circumstances of the Paper Mario series. So there had to be something significant that changed behind the scenes in order for this remake to happen. So I kind of wanted to discuss that today with various theories that I have about how this Thousand Year Door remake could actually be happening. So Tanabe, back around the time that Origami King released, had an interview, and this interview is like one of the reasons why most people, myself included, thought that like anything like this was extremely unlikely, and it's part of the reason why like this remake basically kind of is significant in everything, since this remake basically defies almost everything that is mentioned in this interview, since Tanabe mentioned that ever since Paper Mario Sticker Star, they can't have original enemy designs, or original character designs for NPCs and everything, at least ones that touch on the Mario universe, because they are able to do, like, well, at least around Origami King, they were able to do loopholes to allow certain characters, like, for example, like old Grand Sappy, or the Cutout Soldiers, or the Legion of Stationary, or the Vellumentals. They're technically original characters, but they don't exist within the Mario universe. So that's kind of what Tanabe was saying in that interview there. And then another aspect of it, was that they weren't allowed to modify existing Mario characters. And then there was also, like, other things as well mentioned, that, like, ever since Super Paper Mario, they weren't really leaning heavily into the story. And then other things even before that with other interviews, with Tanabe saying that there was an IP team holding them back. And I actually do think there was some kind of IP team that was, like, involved with Paper Mario and Intelligent Systems, because in the credits of basically any Mario game after the Wii era, maybe even before that, but it wouldn't have been strict at all, whatever team was doing it before then, there was a team of, like, certain character design supervisors. I forgot what it was called exactly, but I think that's probably what they were referring to with the IP team. It was probably something that had to do with that. So, yeah. And then also with Sticker Star, there was the whole thing with only using characters from the Mario world, which I do feel like was kind of misinterpreted from Miyamoto, because I feel like Miyamoto didn't really want to be, like, I don't think Miyamoto was really being entirely strict with Sticker Star. I don't think Miyamoto really wanted the outcome that happened to Sticker Star and everything. So, because he was actually displeased and didn't even like one of the later builds of the game. I mean, sure, it was still from 2011, but it still had that modern style. It still used a lot of the mechanics that were in Sticker Star. So I do feel like a lot of things were misguided there. So that's part of the reason why this seemed so unlikely. So, ever since Origami King, there had to be something that had to change. There had to be something. Since, like, in the Mario franchise, ever since Odyssey and Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, the mandates have mostly been, like, lifted. Like, I know there's that whole debate behind the mandates and everything, but honestly, they don't exist anymore. They're not really a thing that's holding back the Mario series. I mean, between 2011 up until 2016, maybe there were some restrictions and there were some strict design standards in place, but ever since the Switch era, things have been much more lenient. So Origami King was really confusing for a lot of people, since a lot of people thought that they were finally going to go back to doing something really creative, at least in terms of characters and story, because of Odyssey, Luigi's Mansion 3, and different things like that. But I have a feeling that Origami King was actually kind of held back by outdated design standards. So Origami King started development around the time that Color Splash's development ended, so it would have still been during the late Wii U era, so things were still kind of weird then. So somehow, I do feel like Origami King could have been grandfathered into those older design restrictions when they were creating the new ones. So, I feel like it was kind of held back in that way, but I feel like it also could have been the fact that they were kind of, like, a bit stubborn to do something more interesting. Not necessarily the devs, but more on the side of either the IP team and Tanabe, the more kind of, higher, kind of supervising and coordinating side of Origami King, I feel is what held back these designs and everything. The artists and developers themselves seem to actually kind of go against that and actually, like, wanted to put more unique characters in the game. That's hence why there was, like, a lot of loopholes and things. So, yeah, Origami King, it seemed like it was held back by kind of outdated restrictions and everything. So, ever since Origami King, something had to have happened. So, there might have actually been a change in how, like, the games were being handled and everything. So, maybe they were actually finally kind of going along with the newer standards, or, like, the more lenient standards that the franchise is kind of going by. And honestly, at this point, these lenient standards are about as lenient as they were during the GameCube era. Like, they're lenient to the point where they can have a lot of crazy things happen, like Super Mario Bros. Wonder, for example. And also the Peach game as well, which is a spin-off, which doesn't even kind of abide by that one sentiment that, like, mainline Mario games aren't affected by any standards whenever there are standards implemented into the Mario franchise. So it seems like that they were able to finally make a faithful Thousand Year Door remake, and I mean faithful in terms of character designs and everything. So they were finally able to do that because of the fact that these restrictions and everything were lifted. But I don't think that's the only reason why that's happening. Because, I mean, they could have very well could have done something where they did have a different gameplay system, something very weird and convoluted like the modern games. I did like Origami King, by the way. I just feel like it did have some weird decisions there, but I did enjoy it for what it was. But yeah, they didn't, like, go in that weird gameplay direction again while having more unique characters and everything. Don't get me wrong, I still would have had some enjoyment out of that, but I do think it's nice that we are going back to the style of the first two games in terms of gameplay, at least for the remake here. So I do think there were more things involved, like more conditions involved, that kind of made this remake possible. So over the past decade, almost, At least starting with Color Splash more so. I do know there was quite a lot of backlash following Sticker Star in the years after Sticker Star, but I feel like things didn't start to brew quite as much in the Paper Mario community, as well as the Nintendo community in general, until Color Splash. Color Splash is where things really started to get pretty heated with the fan base and everything. That's where a lot of the division and discourse started in the fan base, which is a whole topic on its own. Something that I could discuss for hours about. But it's not really relevant to this video, so I won't really get into it. But since Color Splash, there has slowly been a lot of controversy in the Paper Mario series. Like, there's been a lot of, like, opposition to the current direction of the series, and especially by Origami King, people were just tired of the modern style. Even though, like, a lot of people did enjoy Origami King. I did think Origami King was a pretty good game on its own right. I feel like it was more of the sense that people were just wanting the game to fully return the form rather than do kind of like the half-step thing that Origami King was kind of doing. Because they were doing some really good things in Origami King, but they weren't going all out with it. So it seemed like the game had a lot of missed potential, and seemed like it was only going part of the way. It seemed like they only cared a little bit, but not that much. So, yeah, so with Origami King, I feel like with that, specifically, it seemed like they were kind of, partially addressing, like, the fan feedback and everything. I did mention this a little bit in the last video, but there were various things that just seemed kind of, like, slapped in there and just not really fully implemented. Like, the partners, for example. It was cool to see them in the story, but it did seem like they were kind of half-baked. And then there was also the pseudo-badge system as well. And then they did legitimately do a few really cool things, like the interconnected world, and getting rid of, like, disposable items and everything. So with Origami King, it seemed like they were, like, it's more of throwing a bone to the fan base, rather than actually addressing the criticism and actually fixing a lot of the problems that people had, and actually doing something that quite a lot of the longtime fans have been wanting from the franchise. So that's, like, I think since then they might have actually seen how much people have wanted a 1,000 Year Door remake. Like, Arlo in 2019, he made the petition and also the hashtag for remaster 1,000 Year Door. And that was huge. A lot of people spread it on Twitter, and I remember, like, kind of spreading it myself with a few tweets, like, a little after the trend started, but I do remember kind of participating in it a little bit. But so many people were really supporting a remaster for the 1,000 Year Door. Like, this spanned, like, thousands of people. Many people made videos. Like, just a lot of people have, like, even done things as far as, like, sending letters to Nintendo and just letting them know around the time that Origami King released and everything. Like, even though some people did think it got a little annoying with how much people wanted a 1,000 Year Door remaster, I feel like people effectively got the word out. And it actually kind of reached Nintendo, which is something that normally doesn't happen that often. Like, Nintendo doesn't really, like, directly address criticism. They do address criticism and improve in very subtle ways most of the time. But this is really the first time since, like, Operation, Rainfall, I think it was called? Yeah, where they had the, free, like, European and Japanese exclusive games that weren't brought over to North America on the Wii, including Xenoblade Chronicles. So that was one example of Nintendo actually kind of addressing like that criticism and that like support from the fans and everything. But in this case, it seems to be like on a whole different level, since this isn't just Nintendo of America, but like Nintendo as a whole. And yeah, and I feel like it's really surprising that they'd actually do something like this. I mean, granted, there is the possibility that this could purely be a coincidence that they're doing it, but honestly, I think Nintendo actually kind of has seen the support for a Thousand Year Door remaster, and seen the support of people wanting classic Paper Mario to return in general, or the Mario RPGs to return in general, since Super Mario RPG is also returning, which is like another thing that people have been really vocal about, almost as vocal as Thousand Year Door, with a lot of people wanting Geno to be in Smash and everything, as well as the occasional thing with people wanting remakes. But yeah, the Thousand Year Door definitely had quite a lot of support, so I do feel like it influenced Nintendo and Intelligent Systems in some way. And one interesting thing that I actually didn't mention yet is the fact that in 2016, around the time that Color Splash released, one of the developers in an interview actually said that they would be willing to do a Thousand Year Door remake if enough fans wanted it. So it seems like they're actually kind of being true to that and everything, and actually kind of like proving that since a lot of people have been wanting a Thousand Year Door remake, they're actually doing it and everything. So yeah. But one more thing that I kind of wanted to explain, that's kind of like a theory and everything that I had that's kind of related to this Thousand Year Door remake, is just the state of the series in general. Since I feel like this Thousand Year Door remake, even though it is a remake, it's very telling of what might actually happen in the Paper Mario series going forward, and what they were doing over the past 10 years. So over the past, now even close to 15 years now, counting the whole development cycle of Sticker Star, I feel like some interesting, weird, and downright kind of sad things happened with the franchise, depending on how you look at it. So after Super Paper Mario, they were kind of gonna return to the original style with like the E3 2010 build of Paper Mario Sticker Star when they were showing off the 3DS. And I am obsessed with that one lost trailer as much as I am with Thousand Year Door in this remake now. So I know quite a lot about this E3 2010 build. So with this build, they were going to return to the original style and add some new mechanics, but they were kind of misguided and kind of scrapped this whole direction when Miyamoto kind of explained to Tanabe that it looked too similar to the Thousand Year Door. And I feel like Miyamoto was just kind of saying that they should have done more new things in this Paper Mario game that they were developing, but not necessarily saying that they should throw out the entire formula, but that's what they ended up doing. So it seemed like they were pretty misguided there. And ever since Sticker Star, where they were going in this weird direction of not including many of, or almost any of the elements from the older Paper Mario games, aside from the very, very basic bare-bones RPG turn-based elements, it seemed like they were doing quite a lot of weird things. It seemed like they were throwing a lot of ideas at the wall to see if they sticked. Like, even though Color Splash was pretty reminiscent of Sticker Star in terms of ideas, they were throwing out a lot of ideas out there, like with the paint and everything. Even though that idea isn't inherently bad, I feel like the execution was kind of weird with that game, So it did seem like they were kind of throwing some ideas at the wall. And then Origami King also did a lot of, like, interesting things. Though, in Origami King, I feel like they were much less offensive than they were in Sticker Star and Color Splash, and they actually did have a lot of ideas that had a ton of potential. But with Origami King, it seemed like, it seemed like they were just kind of doing something just to throw it out again, not really like a mechanic that they were sticking to. And the puzzle system in that game was still just kind of a little weird, even though that I did see some potential in it. And honestly, I feel like by the time they were working on Origami King, they kind of did want to push back into that older direction. And that's why they actually did kind of improve a lot of the things with modern Paper Mario and actually started to incorporate some classic Paper Mario elements other than the ones that seemed like they were kind of like a bone thrown towards the older fans. And like the interconnected world and the fact that they did remove disposable items did seem like a couple of the things, with the fact that the modern Paper Mario devs kind of did want to move on from this weird kind of cycle that they were doing with Paper Mario. It did seem like they kind of wanted to break that loop. It did seem like they kind of wanted to do something a little more reminiscent of the older games, even though, like I was saying earlier, they did do some things half-baked. But yeah, I think they really wanted to actually go back to the original style after that. And as well as seeing like the overwhelming support for a remaster, I feel like all of those ideas kind of culminated into the fact that they wanted to remake the 1,000-Year Door and everything. I feel like a lot of those theories that I mentioned kind of influenced that. And I feel like this remake might actually tell some things about the future of the franchise, hopefully. Especially if it sells pretty well, or at least decently. But I feel like now they might actually be going in a direction of kind of evolving the classic style of Paper Mario. Not just bringing back 1,000-Year Door and reusing that same battle system and elements from that game over and over, but taking the 1,000-Year Door and improving upon it, adding new things to it, and kind of evolving that style, as well as adding some of the great visual aspects from the modern Paper Mario games. So, I feel like they're actually kind of evolving that style and everything, and even with this remake, even already, we could see that they are kind of evolving this style of classic Paper Mario, because they have, like, the rigged models again, that have the layered sprites. And they're, like, this time they actually look more stylized. And they look great. They're much higher resolution than the model, or, well, I guess the sprites that were in Color Splash and Origami King, and work really well. And also the fact that they're combining the papercraft aesthetic with, like, the storybook style of the 1,000-Year Door in a way where it actually looks really good. And yeah, it seems like they really are kind of evolving this style, and I really hope that they continue to do this. So yeah, those are some theories that I have about why this 1,000-Year Door remake is actually happening. And yeah, even though it did seem really unlikely, when you think about it, there are some circumstances that does seem like this does kind of make sense. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server if you want to. Goodbye.